G'day fellas, a special tier list coming at you. This is right after Genesis has just happened at the moment. It is 12 o'clock for me. Genesis finished 1 hour ago, and we're going to be doing a tier list based on what we saw. Now, I should provide you guys just a little bit of insight, or not a little bit of an insight, but a little bit of a caveat before we get into this. This will contain spoilers, so if you are looking to spot out those Genesis games or watch those Genesis games, I'll leave a link in the description to where you can find them. But keep in mind, this is going to have spoilers in there, so if you don't want to get spoiled, make sure you come back tomorrow, the next day, whenever it is you've watched those games. Now, let's get into it. One of the big surprises that we've seen throughout the tournaments, I hope you guys who didn't want to see spoilers or didn't want to watch spoilers, didn't want to have any spoilers, have turned this off now, but we're going to get into it. The Mongols. Mongols have come out of this tournament, out of the main event, looking incredibly strong. One of the main strategies that we have started to see has been players using the Mongols and their ability to research improved siege engineering, which is going to enable them to make mangonels out on the field. It's going to make them, or going to be enabling them to make their springalds out on the field and use their infantry to do that. So we've seen Mongols in the early game be a little bit oppressive, you know, doing a tower push, something like that, but then looking to get up to the third age quickly so that they can transition into this mass springalds that we're seeing out of players. So they are going to be firmly in the S tier. There is going to be no other civilization that is in the S tier. That is correct. The French are no longer in the S tier. They have been well and truly worked out at this point after Genesis. Whether that's going to translate into an effect on the ladder, whether you're going to see a lot less French in your games on that ladder, I'm not sure, but at the moment in Genesis, the win rate for the French was incredibly low. I think winning in the main event about 25% of their games in non-mirror matchups, so very difficult for them. French now going to be sitting comfortably in the A tier, still a very strong civilization, obviously the strongest civilization on water, full stop, and really do appear to have the answer to everything, but keep in mind, they don't have the advantage that the Mongols have got when it comes specifically to those springalds being built in the field. So to explain a little bit about that, we have seen throughout the tournament players moving more and more towards these springaled compositions where they quite literally are making only springalds. Now, there is obviously other units that sit in front of that. One of the most common things that we see are spearmen. So a lot of springalds, a lot of spearmen that are coming out. And those spears, those men-at-arms are then used to build those mangonels, those springalds out on the field. And then that is going to enable them to really have a lot of tempo because it means they don't need to be dropping down a siege workshop. They don't need to be dropping down that expensive building to get those units out. And on top of that, they can reinforce in the field. They don't have to have the chance of being intercepted as they cross the map out towards the opponent's base. It's made on the front line and it's made very quickly. So next civilization that's also going to be in the A tier with the French is the Abbasid Dynasty. The Abbasid Dynasty are the only other civilization that gets this bonus the same as the Mongols do. So this civilization can make mangonels and it can make its springalds out in the field just like the Mongols can. The Mongols have got to research the technology for it. The Abbasids can do it straight out of the box. And part of the reason that they are so strong at the moment is because players have learnt to deal with that aggression in the second age with the French and subsequently get up to the castle age and then really punish these French players by just massing up these springalds. And so that's why we are seeing them sitting up in this A tier as well. Quite a strong civilization. We have seen them not really getting out the camel mass, but the men-at-arms in particular are being very, very strong for this civilization. Next civilizations that we're going to do are the C tier civilizations. A little bit of a switch up here. The Holy Roman Empire going to be sitting down in the C tier. So there's not going to be any D tier civilization. So this is the bottom tier at the moment. We didn't see the Holy Roman Empire picked once through the main event, very rarely in the tournament. In your ladder games, undoubtedly, you're still going to be seeing that civilization. I still think it's not a bad pick, but the top level players obviously realizing that it's a very niche pick. We did see Doubt take this civilization in his round of 32 game up against Don Ardi in the final game. But that was the last time we saw the Holy Roman Empire, so it's been very rare. I think they still need a little bit of working out as to what their build orders are, but they have a very difficult time against these top-tier civs. The second C-tier civilization, of course, is going to be the Chinese. We didn't see the Chinese come out at all in this tournament. Obviously, it was used at the lower levels in the round of 512, but let's not talk about that. it was not used at all. Even on the maps like Altai, even on the maps like Hill and Dale, where you expect a bit more of a boom to be happening, it wasn't being picked. So it's just the situation where at the moment they're way too slow. They need some help. They just don't really have any answers to any of the issues that have been thrown out by their enemies, and as a result, it just means that they sit down here in the C tier. Not that this tier isn't viable, okay? I would say that if you're going into matchmaking, you can be playing these civilizations. It's going to be fine. It's going to be based on your skill level, but you're going to have difficulty against these playstyles that are going to be coming through to you over the next week. Now, keep in mind, we will be having a balance patch very shortly. Now, this is going to be a minor balance patch, so don't get your hopes all bundled up about these civilizations potentially getting reworked. The only thing that I believe is getting changed are the Mongol TC drops getting changed, so that there's going to be some sort of mechanic that prevents them from doing that or limits their ability to do that. But even with that change, Mongols still going to be sitting up in the S tier. And the real issue here is the ability to actually be making those artillery units or those siege units out in the battlefield. That's what's so strong. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a potential change, at least coming through to Springalds, whether that's a reduction in their base damage. So they have a base damage of 60, an additional 20 going over to siege. So whether we see that changed from 60-20 to 40-40, so that's 40 base damage, 40 bonus, or whether we even see a 20 base damage with 60 bonus, I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be, but it needs to change. The Springalds way too strong at the moment the way that it is. In addition to that, just being able to build in the field those incredible siege units in the mid game is just so strong, and that's why these two civs are up here. But I digress. Let's talk a little bit more about the B tier civilizations. So first and foremost, we're going to have the Delhi Sultanate, which is moving up in the world, ladies and gentlemen. Look, at the moment, it definitely seems like it could potentially look at being an A tier civilization, but for the moment, it will remain in the B tier. Primary reason being, we have seen Vortex pulling it out in the very first game in the main event, and we've seen his brother, or I think that might have been Lucifron. I'm not sure exactly which one it was, but both of the brothers from Spain, both from the StarCraft 2 and the Warcraft 3 scene, pulling out the Delhi and having some significant success with it. So incredible stuff to see. So basically, what they've been doing is taking early sacred sites. So even using their very first scholar that they start off with, getting it out on the map with a couple of spears, and just getting those early sacred sites in. So dropping down that early mosque, getting up, I think it's called Sanctity, which enables not only you to be getting those sacred sites before the castle age, but it actually doubles the income of your sacred sites. And this is huge. When you think about a sacred site, okay, it's 100 gold that trickles in every minute. Okay, so that is the equivalent of 5 villages. Now double that, because that's what Sanctity gives you. It gives you an extra 100%. So that goes to 200 gold a minute. That's the equivalent of 10 villages on gold. At least, I think it is. I'm not sure. I haven't done the math. If I am wrong, please do leave a comment down below. Make sure you correct me. But those are the numbers that I have been advised at the moment. I'd need to go do my own independent testing. But keep in mind that that's a huge amount of villages. So if you're on a map that's got 2 or 3 or even 4 sacred sites, picking the Delhi up and getting those sacred sites, you don't need to make a second town center, because Delhi have such a huge income coming through from those sacred sites. It's going to be absolutely massive moving into the mid game, because it's basically like just picking up relics, but they're double the strength. It's so strong. And the idea isn't that you go for a victory with these sacred sites. It's just that you use them to empower your economy so that you can then transition into the third age and then really look to build up that men-at-arms, because the Delhi have got some of the best men-at-arms in the game. Obviously, their House of Learning has got a lot of unique techs in there, and one of them, Honed Blades, it's going to be giving +3 damage to those men-at-arms, +3 damage over to those knights as well. So make sure you pick that up. Next civilization, it's going to be in the B tier. It is the English civilization. I think they've moved down a tier at the moment, and that's just primarily because we have seen in the meta that has shifted over the main event specifically. And the reason why we see it shift over the main event is because this is when the top players are pulling out their pocket picks. This is what they have found while they've been preparing for Genesis, and they've been keeping a secret because they don't want other people to find out. That's why we've seen this meta evolve with Springles. It's why we've seen this meta evolving over the course of the tournament with Mongols and the Abbasid Dynasty being able to build out in the open on the battlefield and reinforce, and partly As a consequence of that, we see the English drop down in their strength because obviously, first and foremost, they're not able to do that. But secondly, there's a couple of good timings here. English typically are going to be going for an infantry mass, and these civilizations at the top absolutely are loving mangonel plays, especially sneaky little mangonel plays where they can just get a mangonel out on the field without you even realizing it because you can't scout because of their no requirement to have those siege workshops. So that's the English. English is still a very solid pick if you're playing in matchmaking and you're looking for a civilization to get started with. English are a definite solid pick to start out with. Basic, easy to understand, really good landmarks, and very simple to play. But at the same time, at the moment, towards the higher end, we do see these Mongols and Abbasids just so often doing what they do best, which is the Springords and the men-at-arms. And now finally, the Russ. The Russ were a favorite throughout the tournament, picked in a lot of matchups, but one of the things that we continue to see is that they struggled. They struggled to keep up with the Mongols. They struggled to keep up with the French. And as a result, even though I initially had them pegged at an S tier, I moved them down in my last tier list to A. It is today with a heavy heart that I bring those Rus down to B tier. We are seeing less and less Imperial games and more games decided in the Castle Age, and the true strength of the Rus comes through in that Imperial Age where they've got access to things like the High Armory, where they've got access to units like the Streltsy, but unfortunately the games are ending before the Rus can really make it up to Imperial consistently. We do see that they are wiped out before they're able to get any decent damage on the board. They do have access to those early scouts. They love to bring those survival, or not those survival techniques, those professional scouts out onto the board, but realistically, it's not too helpful for them, and that's part of the reason why it's going to be so important for the Rus to... It's difficult. They just need something a little more in the early game. They're just a bit too slow at the moment. Even with having those knights in the second age, people have worked out how to counter it, how to deal with that knight pressure, how to get up to the third age, and then most importantly, how to punish that position that the Rus are in. So, just in wrapping this up, I want to just do a brief summary of what we've seen so far in the meta. I've talked about it plenty, but essentially what is happening right now is there's a little bit of early pressure, not a whole lot that's going out. Players are very capable of defending this just using towers. And then as a consequence, we're seeing a Springald meta building up here. So players going straight into Springalds, whether that's putting down siege workshops, whether that's the English and getting out the White Tower and training Springalds from that, or whether it's the Abbasid and the Mongols that have just been going up with mass Springalds being created from their infantry and then using support from that. So whether we see men-at-arms, whether we see crossbowmen coming out, whether we see a whole bunch of spears that are out on the front line, and we are continuing to see that. We actually saw a game out of the Viper and the Mister. In fact, it was the last game that was played, and the Abbasid player was very capable of pushing into the enemy's base. There was a counter strategy that had been developed by the French player, but they scouted it, and the Abbasid player was able to transition out of that, but still utilize that bonus in baiting their opponent by dropping down that Springald. So once again, congratulations goes over to the victor of Genesis. If you're watching this, I'm not going to tell you who it was because I'm going to assume that you watched it and you know who that is, and if you didn't want a spoiler, well, I won't give you that one. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. It's going to be a little bit of a short one because this is a post-Genesis roundup. But this is what the meta currently looks like as we leave Genesis and head towards our first balance patch. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.